Hey everyone, Happy New Year, and we want to say Happy New Year and welcome to the very first Radiotopia Presents of 2024. It's a series that we are truly excited about. It's called Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. Now, this is from documentarian Jess Shane, who put out an open call on Craigslist and then worked with 4 strangers to explore the standard rules that documentarians and journalists use to tell their subject stories. So the series gets into all sorts of questions about what happens when people's real lives are collected, edited, and consumed. The show pulls back the curtain on what goes on behind the scenes of your favorite nonfiction shows. And then it turns in on itself and some really interesting twists and turns along the way in the making of the show. I've gotten to know Jess a little bit over the making of this show. Every time I chat with her, there's a new wrinkle to this story. It is really incredible. So go check out the new Radiotopia Presents series, Shocking, Heartbreaking, Transformative. It is out now on your favorite podcast platform. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. This day, January 24th, 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan becomes the first city in the U.S. to add fluoride to their water as part of a controlled study to prevent tooth decay. And guess what? The fluoride, it worked. It did just that. Within 10 years, studies had shown a 65% reduction in tooth decay in Grand Rapids, and fluoridation became standard in the water throughout this country. There's fluoride in the water that you drink today, and hopefully your teeth are doing well as a result. All of this, though, was not without controversy. Fluoride in the water was a huge source of skepticism and conspiracy theories, and the fluoride as mind control theory has all sorts of parallels for a bunch of the conspiracy theories that we see poisoning the well of our politics today. So, Niki, do you like my water metaphor there? The poisoned well, the fluoride, conspiracy theories.
Look, it was even better after you spent some time explaining it.
Yes, exactly. That, of course, is Nicole Hemmer of Columbia. Hello, Niki.
Hello, Jody.
And with us, as always, is Kellie Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello, Kellie.
Hey, guys.
So I want to give a shout out first to a listener, Kath, who suggested this topic. And Kath is from Grand Rapids and wrote us that on the 50th anniversary of this in 1995, the city put up a monument. And Kath writes, it looked exactly as corny as you would imagine, and it had a built-in drinking fountain that always seemed to be broken. Niki, Kellie, did you happen to go into that link that was in our doc and see this monument to fluoridation?
No, I did not.
It is maybe not exactly how I would imagine it, because I would imagine just like a big giant tooth. That's what I want in the middle of Grand. It's like a big giant tooth. It is. It evokes tooth. It evokes teeth. It looks like teeth, but it is a little more conventional of a monument than you would expect. But one thing that's clear here, and we'll actually get into the substance, but Grand Rapids seems to be genuinely proud of this, and it's great. There's like a number of monuments, a bunch of plaques, so it's very cool. And someday when we can get back out in the world, I will take a fluoride trip to Grand Rapids and check
plaques on the monument, but not on the teeth.
Exactly. So, Niki, maybe let's start with the controversy and the conspiracy theories and so forth. I mean, paint a picture in the mid-40s. Why were people skeptical of fluoride showing up in their drinking water?
It's hard to imagine now because we're so used to the idea that water has fluoride and that makes our teeth stronger, and that's a good thing. But, go back to the 1940s, the 1950s when this is happening, and somebody comes along and they tell you that the government is going to start putting this chemical in your water, and they're definitely doing it for good reasons to help with tooth decay. If you're even mildly skeptical of the government, you're going to have some questions. And certainly people did. And look, these range from understandable skepticism. Like, people want to know, like, what are the long-term consequences of this? Like, how is this going to affect my health overall? Why are you adulterating pure water? But it also, gives way to some pretty impressive and long-lasting conspiracy theories that fluoride in the water is going to weaken the American people and make it possible for foreign powers to take them over, that it's actually a mind control drug. Remember, the John Birch Society thinks that President Eisenhower in the 1950s is a is a communist. And now you have government forces putting this in the water. Maybe they're doing it so that the commies can come and take us over, which is a persistent belief in some corners.
I think it just bears a little context. So most people don't understand that fluoride is a natural mineral, that it's found in food. It's found in fresh water, certain lakes and rivers, even in certain parts of the ocean. But I think people also don't realize how bad tooth decay was throughout the United States, that almost 10% of the 2 million men in the Army in 1942 were rejected from service because they didn't have a solid 12 out of 32 teeth. So when you realize that, the health of your teeth can make you unfit for service, this actually is a much bigger deal than people realize. And so being able to have something that can counteract tooth decay mattered so much during this moment.
Yeah. And one little tidbit here is that the reason they chose Grand Rapids, from what I can tell, is because their water supply, I guess it came from Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan has less naturally occurring fluoride than a lot of other places. And so they had a sort of control sample or sorts to do the study. There's also, as is the case with any other big public health study, there's also the control town. So there was a town like a few miles away that didn't get fluoride in their water. And it just, I mean, I think I thought about this with the COVID vaccines. Like you have to do this when you're doing trials, but it's like sucks to be the person who gets the placebo, or sucks to be the town that's the control and doesn't get fluoride for a generation. But, very quickly, I think it started to bear out.
Yeah, I mean, we started by talking about the conspiracies and the people who were skeptical, but this case study town, Muskegon, after they saw how good Grand Rapids were doing, they were like, you have to call this study off. Yeah. We want fluoride in our water too. So there were a lot of places where people were clamoring for this because it wasn't just the national security approach to tooth decay that was so important, although that gets a lot of health issues on the table when people are worried about the strength of the armed forces. But there's an aesthetic component to this. There's a health component to this. And to see the children in the neighboring town with their shiny, white, strong teeth and see your children getting all of these cavities. I mean, this really motivated a lot of people to be pro-fluoride.
And I guess this gets to this larger thing that this makes me think about, which is, both public health measures, but also just preventative public health measures, and how hard it is to message and convince people that preventative measures in the long run end up being more effective and cost saving and so forth. And, we're obviously seeing this now where there's so much focus from some camps on treating a disease like coronavirus as opposed to the simple preventative things like wearing masks and staying distant and so forth that can go into stopping, its impact. And I don't know, we're not branding experts, we're not public health experts, but like Kellie, why do you think it's so hard to make this more subtle case about preventative measures?
I think people are always wary of introducing something new into their lifestyle, into their routine and habit. I looked up how people had brushed their teeth and it was literally just soap and water. And I was like, oh God, think about the idea of what toothpaste was back then. And this is, before Procter and Gamble had introduced Crest and Colgate and all of the different, hundreds of brands of toothpaste that we have now that have fluoride, don't have fluoride. But it was just not something that was a part of the culture. And so I think it takes, I would say sometimes a generation to develop these cultural habits in which you see people have taken on these practices and believe them wholesale. That takes a while to get buy-in. But I also thought it was funny. I looked up how Norman Rockwell ads were used to by Procter and Gamble to sell Crest toothpaste. And you have pictures of little children saying, look, Ma, no cavities. This idea of trying to sell the idea of brushing your teeth and fluoride and toothpaste and all of that had to be part of a marketing strategy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it kind of makes sense. I don't know how you guys are with email, but if I tended to my email every single day in a preventative fashion, it would never get to a crisis point. But is that what I do? No, I wait until I have thousands of unread emails and I wake up in a sweat, panicked because there's so much unseen information that I have to wade through. And I think it's human psychology, right? We're much better at being alert to crises than we are just doing the slow daily work of preventative maintenance.
So you're saying if Google could somehow put some sort of filter into your email that as they come in, it prevents the harmful ones from coming through, then maybe that would be a kind of holistic preventative measure that would, maybe over the course of time, improve our experience.
They should brand it the fluoride filter.
The fluoride filter, exactly. But Niki, let's talk about the conspiracy theories here because, well, first off, as our watcher of conspiracy theories and someone who sort of monitors the conservative ecosystem, is the fluoride is mind control thing still out there?
It is still out there. I mean, again, on the very fringes, but it was much more powerful back in the 1950s because it was the John Birch Society, which was one of the conspiracy groups that's founded in 1958, was publishing things that were saying that fluoride in the water was poisoning people, that it was communist mind control. It was something that was in conservative circles much more visibly in the 1950s and 1960s. Now it has to contend with a lot of other conspiracy theories for people's attention. So even though some people believe it, it's not quite as widespread, but it also has to contend with people who are making not necessarily right-wing health arguments and health conspiracies. Because if in the 1950s and 1960s, the main conspiracy was about communism, by the 70s and the 80s, it's about the purity of the water and that we need to have natural things in our bodies. And now there is a whole sort of natural health complex that has some rooting in science and also gives birth to a lot of different conspiracy theories. I mean, you can actually hear this in the title of a book that came out in 2010. It's called The Case Against Fluoride, How Hazardous Waste Ended Up in Our Drinking Water and the Bad Science and Powerful Politics That Keep It. Right? Yeah. The idea that hazardous waste, that becomes a big thing in the 70s and 80s. And if you can talk about fluoride through that lens, you can wake people up.
Also, I think it's interesting because, fluoride, if you consume too much of it, it can be toxic. So they've taken sort of the element of truth about the toxicity of fluoride and really exacerbated into this greater, bigger thing. Right. But, I think the American Dental Association is always evaluating, the levels of fluoride that should be in your toothpaste or your mouthwash or your water. Making sure that you're not over-consuming, I think, is also a big part of that as well.
Yeah, and Health and Human Services as well. I mean, it was during the Obama administration that for the first time in 50 years, the federal government called for lower amounts of fluoride to be introduced into the water because, as Kellie was saying, there are some negative consequences if you get way, way, way too much fluoride, which is actually why they started studying fluoride in the first place. People in places with huge amounts of naturally occurring fluoride were having problems with their teeth because it was essentially having problems with their teeth, and that's why they were studying it in the first place. So it is still a subject of scientific inquiry.
It's still also a big deal, I think, for people that live in rural areas. So if you don't have access to a water system, some people still live off well water. The areas around me where I live, people still have well water, and there's no fluoride in the water. So you do have to make sure that you have certain additives or toothpaste or mouthwashes to supplement the lack of fluoride in your natural source of water.
And all of this is, I think, such a good reminder that public health initiatives have to be maintained and sustained over time. And obviously, when we think about what we're going through now, it's not like the vaccine is going to flip the off switch on coronavirus and all of a sudden it's gone. This is going to be generations and generations of dealing with this, which is where, again, I think the sort of public trust is so important, right? If there's that sort of base level of understanding facts and understanding trust and understanding a role for government and all of this, then you kind of that's what makes it sustainable. So to that point, and as we start to wrap up, Niki, to come back a little bit to the conspiracy theories and so forth, is there something hopeful in the fluoride story when it comes to conspiracy theories that, yes, over time, a conspiracy theory will fade away? Or is there something not hopeful in that it's still out there, or that, the conspiracy mindset has just found something else to glom onto?
I would not necessarily look at this as a hopeful story all around when it comes to the conspiracy side of things. Certainly Americans have gotten used to having fluoride in their water. Right. It's something that has improved dental health in the U.S. dramatically over the past 60, 70 years. But the conspiratorial approach to both politics and life, as we've seen, is not something that is going away anytime soon. If it's not fluoride, it's the moon landing. If it's not the moon landing, then it's satanic, ritualistic child abuse. If it's not that, then it's vaccines. These ideas about power and a conspiratorial set of ideas about how it's wielded. That's part of human existence. It's certainly part of U.S. history and U.S. politics, and I think we are stuck with it.
These conspiracies don't help much when we have real tragedies like the instance of Flint, Michigan. It makes people who would have normally, treated something as maybe a bit ridiculous all the more serious when they realize the impact that poor water treatment can have on their lives.
Yeah. It's a very good point. All right, we're going to leave it there. I do want to do one also on this day. So in 1961, and we almost made this our main segment. Maybe we'll find another hook for this. But this was the day in 1961 when a bomber carrying 2 H-bombs basically broke up over North Carolina, and the bombs fell to the ground and managed to not explode. And the uranium core of one of the weapons remains lost. And I think this is like a top tier unknown fact in American history, Niki, I would say. I think it's like people who like obscure, scary moments in American history know this one, but a lot of people don't know about this one. But there's a whole lineage of like times we almost really blew ourselves up, particularly in the 50s and 60s.
Not great, Jody. Not great.
That's your take?
That's scary. That's so scary.
Yeah. And now you drive past it. It's just like on the side of the road. There's a little plaque that says like, here's where 2 bombs fell out of the sky and almost wiped out most of North Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
And here people were worrying about fluoride.
Yes, exactly. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kellie Carter-Jackson, thanks to you.
Always a pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. Kala Nakua helps with our transcripts, which you can find at thisdaypod.com. That is also where you can send us a comment about the show or any suggestions for future topics. Thanks again to Kath, who suggested today's topic. You can also email us thisdaypod@gmail.com. My name is Jody Avergan. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Radiotopia.